Hello and welcome to Are You Ready? Preparing for a Presidential Election. I'm Patrick Shepard. I'm very pleased to be joined today by a superlative panel. Today we're joined by Mary Gibert from the General Services Administration, David Marchick from the Partnership for Public Service, and Shelley Finlayson from the U.S. Office of Government Ethics. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
To start, could each of you tell us who you are and what role you play in preparing the government for a presidential election? Could you get started, please, Mary?
Sure. Good morning. Mary Gibert. I'm the Federal Transition Coordinator, and as Patrick said, I'm from the GSA. I am the Federal Senior Career Executive overseeing the federal government's transition activities. In terms of a little bit about myself, I have about 40 years of government service spanning multiple agencies, including the military, as well as with the bulk of my time has been with GSA. And to GSA's role, we play a very unique role in preparing for a presidential election as well as a transition, should there be one. There is preparations to be made and deliverables in both a second-term transition and a full transition.
Excellent. Thank you, Mary. Welcome. David, would you like to go next, please?
Sure. Thank you very much. And thanks for OGE for its great work and for the opportunity to participate with you. So I'm Dave Marchick, and I'm with the Center for Presidential Transition, which is part of the Partnership for Public Service. And we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization focused on effective transition planning, either to a second term or for a new president. And we work with three constituencies. We're working with the Trump White House. We're working with the career agency officials responsible for transition planning. And we're working with the Biden team to prepare for either eventuality. And our mission is whomever becomes president on November 4th, or whenever an election is called, should be ready for January 20th, whether they're a new president or a re-elected president.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome. And Shelley, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shelley Finlayson. I'm OGE's Office of Government Ethics Chief of Staff and Program Counsel. For this purpose, I am OGE's Transition Director, both for the agency and representing the ethics program government-wide. So I represent the ethics program on the Agency Transition Directors Council that Mary leads. I work with the partnership closely on the related work, and I also respond to external inquiries about the ethics program work regarding elections to Congress and other stakeholders.
Excellent. Welcome. So as we enter the final month before the election, we want to take some time to talk about where we've been, where we are, and where we are headed. So my first question is, why is it so important for the executive branch and for ethics programs in particular to prepare for a presidential election? Would you mind getting that started, please, David?
Sure. Well, it's critical for our nation, and the work that OGE and ethics officers around the agencies do is absolutely central. Let me start with the issue of personnel, because the two big issues in any transition are personnel and policy. On personnel, there are 4,000 presidential appointees who need to be appointed if a new president is elected. That includes 1,250 people that need to be confirmed by the Senate and about 2,750 individuals who go into other positions, which are non-career SES, often the chiefs of staff or general counsels, or deputies and secretaries around the government, Schedule Cs, and then another type of appointment called presidential appointments, which tend to be boards and commissions, but also White House jobs. So if a new president is elected, there will be just a huge amount of work for everybody that's listening to this broadcast. So that means ethics reviews, OGE reviews, negotiations, divestments, and all the important work that you do for a very, very large number of officials. To give you an example, President Bush had over 500 presidentially appointed Senate-confirmed people in place at the end of the first year. President Obama had around 450, and there were many, many more that were nominated in the first year of their presidencies. So you might be asking, well, what does that mean if President Trump is reelected? Well, our data shows that you can expect a huge surge if he's reelected. So our data shows at the deputy secretary, the deputy secretary, or the undersecretary level, almost half of the officials in the last 3 two-term administrations have left within 6 months of the second inauguration. In addition, there are about 150 key positions around the government that are vacant today. So if you take the normal pace of about half the positions being replaced, plus the large number of vacancies, one can expect a high volume of new appointments should there be a re-election of President Trump. That means that all of you are going to be incredibly busy, regardless of what happens, that we see a surge in appointments in year 1 and year 5 of 2-term administrations, or in year 1 of 1-term administrations, and the work you do is critical. So I guess our message to you is, regardless of what happens in the election, be ready for a busy year.
Excellent. Thank you. So it sounds like it's really important for our folks to be prepared.
Absolutely.
And Mary, do you have anything to add to that from GSA's perspective?
From GSA perspective, we're really looking more globally, government-wide, and making sure that all the interagency coordination is happening among the agencies. And as Shelley mentioned earlier, she plays a key role in the Agency Transition Directors Council in terms of making sure cross-government that all the agencies are aware of the ethics requirements. So our focus is more on intergovernmental and readiness in general, but to reiterate what Dave had said earlier, there is work to be done whether we have a second-term president or a new president. It's not all for naught. There's lots of activities underway and lots of work happening now, and all of that, a good deal of that work is required whether there is a new president or not.
So the good news is all of our preparations will not go to waste, regardless of what happens. But the bad news is we're going to be very busy regardless as well.
Correct.
So Shelley, your perspective is much closer to the ethics community. We work with them every single day. We're part of the community. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, Dave said it very well. I mean, right, it's a huge undertaking, irrespective of the outcome of the election. And there's risk as positions turn over to our nation, right? I mean, we're talking about top leadership positions, and getting them filled quickly and being ready and prepared to manage that process is really important to our nation. Ethics officials across government, 5,000 ethics officials out there, have an important role, both in that presidential appointment, Senate confirmation process, also just in the onboarding and offboarding of folks, period, right? They're coming and going as positions turn over. Our job is to prevent conflicts of interest and make sure people are serving with integrity. There's a whole life cycle to that, right? We want to use our processes to make sure they come in with that in mind, the public service messaging in the presidential appointment process, using financial disclosure, training, all those opportunities, but also while they're serving honorably while they're in, and then as they think about going, right? Are we making sure that they understand the post-employment restrictions and that all of that's happening? So yes, preparation is important, irrespective of the outcome.
I think that's a really important point, to remember that we're not just talking about onboarding folks, but those positions will be vacated by other officials, and those people will need ethics services to avoid post-employment concerns. So I think that's a good thing for the ethics community to keep in mind. Well, so election readiness is not something that the government does over a few days or weeks. Planning starts months, even years ahead of an election. So what are some of the key pieces of preparation that are already in place? I think, Mary, from your perspective at GSA, you might be in a good position to get us started.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. There's a lot going on, and it started 2.5 to 3 years ago. And we have been preparing for whatever the outcome in. And as we said earlier, there are things that happen no matter what the outcome is. And one of the big things that GSA provides is the space and services to include IT platform, secured network to the pre-elect. Should we have one or two? In this case, we have one, and that space has been provided to the Biden team. So they are currently in the space. We also are working with our inaugural partners. So, there's going to be inauguration, whether it's a first term or a second term, an inauguration will be held. So we coordinate and provide space for our federal partners, and then later on for the volunteers who plan the inaugural itself. And then we manage $1 million. So there is $1 million in training and orientation to the point that both Shelley and Dave made, that there is turnover irregardless of what the outcome is. And this money is made available to a new president or a current president to provide training to high-level officials on how to navigate the government and what to expect. So that's in case we have a second-term president. Then there's additional items that should we have a full transition. We would then move into post-elect services, which would expand the space and services that are provided in a pre-elect environment. We also are helping agencies prepare, because we are preparing either way for the landing teams, that the agency review teams that come into agencies after a determination of an apparent winner is made. So there's a great deal of work that happens with that. If there should be a change, we also provide services to the outgoing president and vice president. So there's a second set of activities that kick in with a full transition. In terms of intergovernmental support, as Shelley is part of the Agency Transition Directors Council, which is co-chaired by myself, as well as the Deputy Director for Management at OMB. And guidance is coming out from there. We've issued guidance. Agencies have met major milestones in terms of providing succession plans. That was required by September 15th. And they're busy preparing for the November 1st briefing material guidelines that are due, which will include, I'm sure, many of the ethics folks in terms of making sure that the materials are appropriate and public, and those materials that are not public, that before they are briefed, the appropriate clearances are provided. So there's a lot of activity going on out there within the agencies and across government.
Excellent. Thank you. So it sounds like there's a lot of work going on in terms of space, people, and information to prepare for whatever happens after the election. Shelley, you're closer and sort of very close to the preparations that are specific to the ethics community. Could you share with us some of those that have already taken place?
Sure. We've been working at preparation for the better part of the year, in addition to our normal support of the ethics community. So, kicking off with the National Government Ethics Summit, we've provided about 24 courses for ethics officials. We've launched a new post-employment curriculum, as Patrick was mentioning. The offboarding part is really important, so that's been refreshed and made available. We've also internally been doing a lot of cross-training and making sure our own staff are ready to flex, right? We're a small but mighty, as we like to say. So we have to cross-train folks and make sure they're ready for that volume of work that might be coming our way or will be coming our way, irrespective of the outcome. In addition, we run Integrity, our electronic filing system, and we've been doing a lot of work in the past year to expand the stability of the system, make some enhancements, and make sure that system's ready to go and support. Of course, it's ongoing, and we've now got 24,000 of the 26,000 public filers in the system, but we want to make sure it's really ready to go for the intensive volume of the PAS process. So that work's been undertaken over the year. We've also updated a whole host of resources for ethics officials. So some of our core resources, our financial disclosure guide, our ethics agreement guide, have been updated and overhauled with lessons learned and new guidance. And in addition, all of our specialized resources are available to folks now. And that includes the transition team guide, list of PAS positions, checklists for financial holdings, and most importantly, the nominee guide, which has been completely overhauled in response to senior leaders' feedback about their experience with the process. It's pretty blunt and tells them what they're facing as they head into the process, but also how to serve with integrity while they're in and what to think about on a post-employment. So I really recommend that to folks. That was a big undertaking and is useful irrespective with PAS nominees right now. That's not just if there's an election outcome type of situation. So, as Mary mentioned, I've been serving on the ATDC and making sure that the ethics responsibilities and issues are being raised in that forum, working with the partnership on their materials and some of what Dave will talk about, some of the activities they're undertaking. And on top of it, we launched a new website to try in advance of the election to make everything easier to find. So that's some of what the big things that we've done We've complied, as Mary mentioned, with our own succession planning submission and making sure we're ready to go. We're working on our briefing materials and the strategic planning for the whole ethics program as we think about that process. Contributed to the transition directory that GSA maintains, which is a wonderful resource for folks that they should check out, and contributed to the reports that have gone to Congress. So there's really been a whole host of activity that has either touched on or been done to support the ethics community over the year.
Excellent. So it sounds like OGE has been working hard to develop the knowledge and skills of ethics officials, shore up infrastructure, and make tools and resources available to assist them in the transition. So that's sort of the inside view. Do you have a perspective from the partnership, Dave?
Well, we've been working for 4 years, essentially. So this is our third or fourth cycle where we've been involved in transition planning. And as soon as the last election was completed, we worked closely with both the Clinton teams and the Trump teams on their transition efforts. We started again. So what did we do? We looked at everything we learned in the last cycle, what the pain points were, what we could do better, and what the transition teams could do better. We have a guide called the Presidential Transition Guide, which is on our website, Center for Presidential Transition. And it's a 250 plus page guide of everything that one needs to think about for presidential transition planning. And we updated that guide. We updated the guide to focus on second term planning. We updated the guide with a First Lady transition strategy, with new materials, with new job descriptions. There was just a whole host of new work. This year, our work has intensified. So one thing we've done in cooperation with Mary and the rest of the team at GSA and also with Shelley is we host something called the Agency Transition Roundtable. So Mary's work is very, very important, and it includes a designated list of agencies by statute. There are a whole host of other agencies, independent agencies, smaller agencies, commissions, who are not part of the ATDC. And what we do is we host an interagency roundtable to share best practices and lessons learned with all of those agencies. So last week, actually, Mary and Shelley gave a presentation to the ATR, the Agency Transition Roundtable, and we had over 60 agencies and 120 people from around the government, career officials who are working incredibly hard to prepare for whatever happens. And so our work goes on, it's very busy for 4 years, and right now there's just an incredible, incredible ramp. So Mary and I sometimes talk at 6 in the morning and at 10 at night, and people are working just incredibly, incredibly hard all around the government. And I want to give a tip of my hat to the career federal officials who are working so hard and diligently to prepare for either eventuality.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, it sounds like you mentioned things ramping up, and we're about a month out from the election. And I imagine this is a period where preparations become much more intense. I was wondering if there are any sort of key activities that are happening right now that ethics officials should be aware of, that they may be interested in. And maybe the perspective from GSA would be a good place to start, Mary.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. So as Dave said, there is a ton of work going on. The ATDC is a core group, and we have clearance processes going on. We have ethics stuff going on. We have OPM stuff going on. So part of what the role of the GSA is to, as from the election perspective, is make sure this information gets out to everyone. So as Dave mentioned, we have the ATDC, they have the agency transition roundtables, and we also host for the non-ATDC meetings as well. And so we're just trying to get any way we can get information out, get it out. And the partnership has been a great forum to do that. So what folks should be doing now, I would, again, second to look at the agency transition directory. There's a wealth of information there because, as we said, a lot's already been done. 2 reports were sent to Congress. There's information about who are the members, the ATDC members. We are also linked cross-government to other agencies, so it's meant to be a one-stop shop as it relates to primarily for the candidate, but anyone who is looking for transition information. The briefing materials are important to have those ready sometimes, and we're working to not have them become doorstops, have them be meaningful information that is just in time for the team coming in. And that's a lot of work and effort, and also thinking about things differently in terms of what if the agency review team arrives virtually as opposed to in person? What does that look like? So we're having those conversations across government. So the briefing materials are important. We're in the midst of negotiating the MOU between the current administration and the Biden team on the rules of engagement for the agency review teams. So just tons of stuff going on. Each agency has specific mission that's related and they will face as it relates to a transition. And then we have the overall government-wide perspective as well.
Excellent. Thank you. So it sounds like there's a lot going on right now and a lot that agencies should be doing to prepare for the possibility of an incoming new leadership. So that's from sort of inside the GSA's perspective. I'm sure the partnership is also very busy, Dave. Is there anything you're doing right now that it would be good for the ethics community to be aware of?
So there are a couple things that I'd encourage the ethics community to check out. One is on October 2nd, we're taping this a week in advance of that, so I think it'll be released late September. We're having perhaps the largest and most distinguished group of transition experts speak at a conference called Talking Transitions. And you can sign up for the conference. It's all online. It's open to anybody on the Center for Presidential Transition website or the Partnership for Public Service website. And at that conference, we're going to be focusing on transition issues related to either a first term or a second term with truly an all-star cast. So we have 5 former chiefs of staff. We have several cabinet officers. We have people that have run transitions. We have people that have helped take a candidate to president and dealing with the transition from campaigning to governing. So people like Valerie Jarrett, who played that role for President Obama, and Karen Hughes, who played that role for George W. Bush. And then we have fantastic moderators, including Margaret Brennan, who's the host of CBS Face the Nation, and also Amy Walters with the Cook Political Report. So that's a fantastic resource that I hope that ethics officials around the government will listen to. I think you'll be able to learn a lot. I'm looking forward to learning a lot. And then second is we have created a podcast called Transition Lab. You can get it on Apple or Spotify or however you'd like to download podcasts. And we've explored every issue related to the presidential transition. We've done profiles of every presidential transition from Carter to Trump, the good, the bad, the ugly. We have done historical approaches and historical analyses of transitions with people like Ken Burns, the famous documentary filmmaker. And we've also done profiles of the work that important career officials are doing around the government, including someone named Mary Gibert, who was a guest on Transition Lab, and she did a great job. We also have a couple of episodes which are critically important for ethics officials. One with 2 former heads of the Presidential Personnel Office on vetting, on the way that they approach selecting personnel, on some of the tactics that job suitors pursue, which maybe help work out well, and some that didn't work out so well. And also some of the problems they've encountered with confirmations and nominations, including with respect to ethics. And then we've had 2 former White House lawyers and vetting experts talk about dealing with OGE, dealing with the ethics officials, and the perspective of either vetting those candidates from the White House or advising those candidates to deal with ethics officials around the government. It can be very, very difficult. It can be painful. You're dealing with individuals' lives. And we really get into some of the challenging issues that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I hope that you check both those events out, both the Talking Transitions event on October 2nd and then our podcast.
Excellent. Thank you. So it sounds like you're really gathering up some of the institutional memory available and trying to transfer that to the folks who need that information.
Absolutely.
From the perspective at OGE, what are some things that are going on right now at OGE that ethics officials should be looking for and utilizing?
Thanks, Patrick. So today, kicking off with this session, we're beginning a whole new round of training that we're going to be offering to ethics officials. Some of that advanced financial disclosure training on particular holdings and interests to prepare for that nominee PAS process that'll be busy, as we've said, no matter what. We're also going to be offering some planning workshops, election readiness planning, thinking about heading into the election, but also thinking about heading into January. So there'll be about 10 sessions, including this one, as well as Patrick is going to interview White House transition project lead, Martha Kumar, and get her thoughts and perspective as well and share that with the ethics community. So we're going to have a whole new host of offerings. People should be on the lookout for those. They should also be checking out those resources I was mentioning and making sure they're familiar and starting to use those that are all available to them. And just reaching out to us and making sure, as we represent the ethics community on the ATDC and some of these forums, that the issues and concerns have been raised and shared with OGE.
Great, thank you. That sounds like an excellent suite of tools and trainings to help the community get up to speed. So I just have one more question. A number of the ethics officials throughout the government may not have been through a presidential transition before. We have a matter of weeks before the election, and then we have the post-election period. So the question is, how should they be using these few weeks between now and the election to prepare themselves? What are some things that they should be doing right now to get ready? And maybe the perspective from GSA would be a good place to start.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. I think the one thing that I would say is, Shelley had mentioned every agency, even if they're not one of the ATDC agencies, but every agency is required to have an agency transition coordinator. So my advice would be find out who that person is, make sure that you're connected with them and are keeping up with all the information that is being disseminated through the various forums, whether it's through the ATDC, the non-ATDC, the Agency Transition Roundtable, the Agency Transition Director site, Agency Transition Directory links everyone together, has those reports on there. There's a wealth of information out there. But I would say pay attention, be aware, be ready, because something, irregardless of the outcome, there is, as we said, work that has to be done and work that will be utilized whether there is a change or not, because there will be a change in personnel, as history has shown.
Excellent, thank you. So sort of prepare now, coordinate with others, and pay attention, because this is a critical juncture. And from the perspective of the partnership, what are some things that folks could be doing in the next few weeks?
I would advise to get a little sleep and relax, because come November 4th, it's going to be very busy for all of you. There's just going to be a huge surge of activity and pressure on you to do whatever you're doing faster, better, and to do it yesterday. There's also a very distinct possibility that we won't know the election results on November 4th. It's a highly contested election where they're mail-in ballots. The ballots may take longer to count. And so there's a decent possibility that the normal 78-day transition could be shorter. So what does that mean for ethics officials around the government? That means you're not going to have 78 days to do your work. There's a decent possibility that it'll be compressed. Regardless of that, regardless of when the election is called, regardless of the outcome, the next president and the next president's team will expect to seat their people on January 20th or before, or soon thereafter. And there will be just enormous pressure on the whole ethics community to do things faster, better, speedier, and every single appointment counts. So it's critical for our country to get appointees in their seats. We learned after 9/11 that when the Bush administration didn't have critical national security personnel in their seats, it hurt the country. The 9/11 Commission focused heavily on that. And so your job, your work is critically important for the country, and it's going to be busy, it's going to be compressed, and it's going to be high pressure. So get a little rest and get ready.
Excellent. I think that's great advice because we're not just navigating one of the most difficult and challenging times as an ethics community where we're involved in all the vetting, but we're also navigating a global pandemic, which could compress our timeframes. So yes, be ready, I think, is very good advice. Any final thoughts from OGE, Shelley?
Well, everyone has said a lot of what I would say. I guess I'd really encourage people, as we're doing with an OGE, to really take a hard look at your program, an honest assessment. Are you ready? What do you need to do how can you use the next few weeks to shore up any expertise, any gaps? Do you need some cross-functional training for your staff to make sure they're ready to flex, depending on what the needs are? Have you done that contingency planning? Have you thought through the delay or the potential scenarios and what that means for resourcing your program or staffing your program or what expertise you might need? I think really asking those kind of hard questions now and making sure and it's so busy and there's so much noise and we are navigating a global pandemic and we've got all the virtual issues layered on top of it. But really carving out some time to get your head clear and honestly assess your program's capability, I think is pretty important at this point.
Excellent. That's great advice. So we hope everyone's preparing. We hope everyone is staying safe and healthy, and that you're getting a little bit of rest in preparation for what's sure to be a very busy time. So thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for all the work that you're doing to ensure that our government is prepared for the presidential election. And we look forward to talking to you again sometime soon.